Baik, Auzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrofil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah, because Allah gives us strength to continue our conference today. And let us correct it. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh to the hardworking organizers, to the committee members, to the speakers, to the presenters, as well as the participants, and as well as students. Let us correct our niyat why we are here. Inshallah, with the good niyat, Allah grant us with a lot of pahala, and to get the barakah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let us start our conference today with reciting of Surah Al-Fatiha. We would like to welcome our third speakers, the keynote speaker for our conference, the Prof. Waleed Fekry Faris, who are quite prominent and well known in University Islam Malaysia, in our Kulliyyah and IIUM. But before we invite Prof. Waleed to deliver his talk, let me read a little bit of biodata of Prof. Waleed. So, Prof. Waleed received the BAc degree in mechanical engineering with a specialization in construction equipment of road vehicles and MSc degree in applied mechanics from Zigzag University, Zagazig, Egypt in 1989 and 1996 respectively, and the PhD degree in nonlinear dynamics from Virginia Tech, Blacksburg in 2003. He is currently the director of International Institute of Muslim Unity and has been a professor with the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Kulliyyah of Engineering, IIUM since 2012. A long time. He is also the technical advisor of MIT Technologies Malaysia since 2010. His main interest for the past 20 years while teaching and researching in particular has been a field he has been privileged to be able to work in ever since 1991 in several different countries and with people of varying backgrounds. So he has, to his credit, 3 books and more than 80 technical papers in reputed journal and refereed conference proceeding in vehicle, structure and system dynamic and control and noise, vibration and harshness. Prof. Waleed is a member of the Japanese Society of Automotive Engineers and a technical committee member and reviewer of several international journals and conferences worldwide. If I would like to read more biodata of what we call it, of Prof. Waleed, I'm not going to start the conference. So I might stop there, but one of the important thing that I would like to highlight, I have many Murabbi and Murabbiyah in the IIM. Prof. Waleed is one of my Murabbi, inshallah. So without further ado, Prof, I would like to invite you to deliver your talk. Tafaddal mashkura.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. First, thank you very much, Professor Zuraida, for the introduction. And thank you for inviting me, for the organizing committee, for inviting me to speak in this esteemed conference. Inshallah, today the topic will be teaching ethics, engineering ethics, challenges and future thoughts. Let me start by a very classical quote by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, about the issue of truthfulness. So he said, you must be truthful, for truthfulness leads to righteousness, and righteousness leads to paradise. And a person will keep speaking the truth and striving to speak the truth until he will be recorded by Allah as a Siddiq, a truthful person. And beware of telling lies, for lying leads to immorality, and immorality leads to hellfire. A man will keep telling lies and striving to tell lies until he or she is recorded by Allah as a liar. The heart of ethics is truthfulness. The heart of ethics is truthfulness. And this is one of the main pillars of the values of ethics. So the outline of the talk today, I will start by talking about professional ethics, why it is important, why we are what it is, and why we are teaching it. And then we will look into why we need to teach ethics, and then we'll take a look on the typical contents of engineering ethics books, how the content will look like, and we will try to differentiate between ethics, moralities, and values. And we will talk about the sources of values, and we will talk about the issues that face engineers in teaching engineering ethics, the mindset of the engineer. And we start to talk about the challenges in teaching ethics, and also some thoughts for the future, the way forward. Professional ethics, in fact, has been a very important topic, not recently, but since very long time. We have books about professional ethics in history of humanity in several civilizations. People used to have a discussion on the ethics and behavior of a medical doctor, the ethics and behavior of different professions at this time. And in the Islamic civilization also, there was a lot of books on the professional ethics at this time. But in the modern time, it became a kind of a big interest because it will organize the relationship within any profession. So people will define professional ethics as the principles that govern the behavior of a person or a group in a business environment, whatever this business environment is, like values. So professional ethics provide rules on how a person should act towards other people and institutions in such an environment. Without a clear rules and ethical framework, in fact, the relationship in any environment will turn out to be chaos. So this is a necessity. This is not something that people will look for because it's a kind of a luxury or something extra. People are looking into it, but the humanity, the experience of the humanity, if the people don't have a kind of a social contract on what kind of principles, what kind of values they should put if they are cooperating together, then it will be a complete chaos. And specifically in the age that we are facing now, which some people call it the age of moral fluidity, because ethics and morals are becoming very unidentified, and there's a lot of difference of opinion about many things. So in conclusion, professional ethics is a necessity. This is why all organizations, in fact, not only a few, but all organizations, they will have a code of ethics. They will have a list of acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior within any organization. So based on this, we need to understand why teaching professional ethics, whether it's engineering ethics or any other professional ethics, is important. So we can list here 5 reasons. Number 1, it will introduce a student to faulty rationalization, which is very important. So sometimes we need to train the students about that sometimes your view of a certain situation or your rationalization on a certain situation is not correct, And this one, nobody will know by intuition. It needs to be taught, people need to be trained to do it. And then second is also to expose students to opposing viewpoints. And this is very important. This is very important because we are working in a global environment. So people are graduating from Malaysia and moving to work in United Kingdom, and people working in graduating from United States are moving to work in Middle East or working in South Korea or any other place. So basically the work market, the job market is becoming very global. And it is very important for anybody who is working on a global level to be aware of the different stands and different point of view for a certain ethical stand. And so whether this ethical stand is based on culture, based on religion, or based on norms that the organization have. So it's very important to be open-minded and also to try to understand where people are coming from. And again, this one is not coming by intuition. This needs to be taught. This need to be, people need to be trained to look into it. Number three, allow students to develop critical thinking skills. And this is a very important point. Ethical decision-making is a critical thinking experience. Ethical decision-making is a critical thinking experience. So whenever we try to take decision, whether in our life or in our work, if we don't have the critical thinking skills, then our ability to take the right and the ethical decision it will not be fruitful. We might take a wrong decision, and a wrong decision because we don't have the capacity or the ability to critically think about the situation that we are in, the different circumstances and the stakeholders and all these type of things that we need to bring into discussion whenever we take any ethical decision. So critical thinking for ethical decision making is a must. Critical thinking for ethical decision making is a must. And again, this is not, people are not born with this. So we need to train the students on how to approach such ethical decisions. And definitely it will be helpful for students later when they graduate to be equipped with all the necessary tools, the basic tools, so they can be successful in their careers later. And finally, by putting the student into different case studies or raising questions about how to take ethical decision, and also train them on the process of ethical decision making, then it will be part of their behavior. It will be part of their attitude towards anything. So basically, teaching ethics is not only important, but it is necessary. It is not only important, it is necessary, because as I mentioned, everybody agrees that we are not born with these skills. In fact, yes, from the environment, we can pick up few ethical codes that we learn, whether in the places of worship, or we learn from the family, or we learn from the society. But many times we don't understand what is behind this ethical codes. We don't understand how we implement them in the right time and in the right place. So all of this needs training. All of this needs training. So it's not really a kind of structural in the human being. Yes, the ideas are there, but the application needs a lot of training. This is a typical outline of one of the books about engineering ethics. This is one of the good books available in the market on engineering ethics. And actually, all the books are quite similar. There's a bit of standardization to the content of any book on engineering ethics. So we will find that people will talk about what is engineering ethics, and then they will put working with cases, And then we will look into the engineering profession and the professional organizations, and we look into also basic ethical principles for global engineering, which is now is a kind of a trend. People looking, as I mentioned, we are working in a global environment, so engineers and other professions need to be sensitive to the others' views. And then also the prime responsibility for safety. So safety is becoming part of it usually. And then also the issue of the business environment, what we should know, and the issue of cross-cultural issues, or some people call it cultural intelligence or cultural sensitivities. All of this are the same thing for this to be more sensitive to the other cultures, autonomy and the duties, conflict of duties and dissent, and also the issues of rights, with the rights of the workers, rights of the engineer himself within the work environment. So basically all the books related, or the majority of the books related to engineering ethics will go around these ideas, and the content is quite useful, the content is quite interesting, but it goes along with the structure of the engineering mindset. It goes along with the structure of the engineering mindset. And one of the issues that we need to look at is actually the engineering mindset is governed by three issues. Number one is standardization, and number two is legality, and finally it would be the ethical decision making. So because of the engineering profession usually will we cannot work without having standards. Engineers are trained that you cannot make a design, you cannot approve a certain design, you cannot work in any environment without having standards. So you should have a reference, and then once you have the reference, things will be clear. The other part also for engineers that they are looking for, and their mindset is legality of whatever you're doing. So any contract, whether it is mechanical, electrical, computer, anything, we always look into the legal aspect of it. We always look into the legal aspect of it. And in both standardization and legality, we have procedures. In both standardization and legality, we have procedures. So this affected the view of the engineers to the ethical issues. So the ethical issues became codes. So all engineering professions, all engineering societies, whenever you join any engineering society, part of the package that will be sent to you is the ethical code of the society. And an ethical code, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10, or 15, or 20. It depends on the society and other things. Once you work in a certain company, also you will receive a list of the code or the activity that you may do or you may not do. So basically, the ethics in the engineering profession transform it to be following the standardization process, And as we will see, this is very challenging because sometimes, unfortunately, many people will not look anymore into this codes. They will not remember it. It's considered part of the things. Okay, you sign on it. You can read it a little bit, but you are not really reflecting on it. You are not really trying to understand why people are putting these codes. And I have the experience of asking many engineers working in different environments, or also they are part of a certain societies, engineering society. I ask them, do you understand why the code of this society looks like this? Did you try to reflect on why they are having this list of activities or this list of do's and don'ts? Majority of the people, they don't actually pay much attention to the ethical codes. And it goes not only in engineering ethics, but it goes into other professions as well. Many organizations will have their ethical code published on their websites. And rarely you can find people looking into it, people working in the environment, looking into it. They will look into it only in case of there is a disciplinary action against them, or they will look into it if they would like to see the legality of something or illegality of a certain behavior. So this is one of the big challenges, and I claim that this is due to the engineering mindset. This is due to the engineering mindset, because the engineering mindset is standardization. People need a list of things and they need a certain procedure. If they don't have the procedure, if they don't have the standards, then engineers cannot work. Engineers cannot work, which is, of course, is okay on the professional level, but on the ethical level, these issues are not as such. These issues are not as such. So let me try to look into a very important concept that will differentiate between many things. When people talk about ethics, we have values, we have ethics, and we have morality. And then there's a difference between three of them. They are not the same as people working in the value and ethics philosophy and other things. So values represent the cardinal ethics, if we can call it the cardinal ethics, which usually are few. Usually are few. They are not many. They are not many. And from these cardinal values, main values that we believe in, whatever the source, why we believe in them, we can look into this. We'll look into this later. But that we believe in them. From these values, we extract the ethical code that we are behaving according to it in our life or our profession. In our life or our profession. Ethical codes usually refers to do's and don'ts. So it's a list of activity, whether it is permissible activity or impermissible activity. And this is usually what any profession will provide you. The ethical code of any profession, do and don't, do and don't. But the value will let us know why we should do this, why we should not do this. So why we should do this, why we should not do this. And if people follow the ethical code, they apply the ethical code, then we are talking about moral personality or moral community or moral organization or anything like this. And in professional ethics, we look into the organizational culture. And part of the organizational culture is the ethical behavior within the culture. So some organization are known that they don't have really a good ethical attitude towards customers, towards the people, employee, and other things. And some organizations are quite well known to have a very good moral stand and also very good moral attitude. I remember, for example, this is how people should have a kind of a stand. Disney company, the very famous company for cartoon and other things, and they have Disney Park all over the world and many other things. At a certain point of time, they were planning to buy a gambling company. They were trying to buy a gambling company. So the board of the company of Disney, the majority rejected the project of buying because it's against the family values and the family ethical attitude of Disney, because Disney is directed to kids. So based on this, we should not buy activity, we should not buy any business activity that actually contradict with what we are promoting. So this is an example how organization, if they have a very clear view, they have a very clear view of what they are standing for and what their ethical code is, they will behave in even very big projects. And we are talking here about projects, billions of dollars, not a small project, not a small project. So the ethical code is the middle way, So if I have an ethical code, why we put this pyramid? Because if I have an ethical code, it doesn't mean that I understand the value behind it. It doesn't mean that I am really applying it. So the ethical code will have no meaning unless I try to rationalize bonds, and also will have no value if I am not really applying it on the personal level, or the organizational level, so people can see the manifestation of this ethical code. Otherwise, ethical codes will be just an absurd, something like people put it for the sake of satisfying the requirement, paperwork requirement. And unfortunately, many organizations currently are doing so, as I mentioned. This is why it's very important to rationalize ethics for any profession, including the engineering profession. The values that people are having, whenever we have any values, there are many sources for these values. And we need to reflect what kind of value we brought from this or that. So still number one for the values for all over the world is actually religion, whether it is Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism or any other, or Shinto. All these religions are providing a big framework of values, a big framework of values. And this is why it's very important when you work as a professional, as an engineer, you work in environment which has a religious background. You need to be aware of the religious sensitivities and the religious value framework for this environment. Otherwise, you will cause a lot of trouble for yourself and for your company and for the people working with you. The second source of values is the traditions. People are born, asked to do so, and they are following this. And when they have kids also, they will ask them to do so. The same goes in organizations. Some organizations are well known of few things. So all the employee, generation after generation, will inherit the value system of the organization. So they will do it and they will try to look into it, to follow it. Also, family is one of the sources, and friends and peers is also another source of values. Community and society at large also will provide certain values for the person. Schools, media now is shaping the value system of humanity, whether for good or for bad. And organizations. I would like to stop at the issue of organization for a while here, because as we mentioned, we are talking about engineering ethics, we are talking about professional ethics. So how the organization, can the organization change the behavior of the employee? Yes. There's a lot of case studies, about people who have been maybe not disciplined, maybe not time conscious, and once they join a certain company that have a tradition of discipline or tradition of being time conscious or something like this, they will transform to be time conscious, they will transform to be disciplined. So the organizations have a great influence, on the employee. And also sometimes a disciplined employee, a disciplined time conscious employee, and also an ethical employee can join a certain organization. And this organization has a kind of a moral fluidity, as people call it. So there's nothing clear, nothing clear about the morals and ethics in this organization. Then this employee will lose his or her values, in fact, in the organization. So the organization can make you acquire new good values, and also can make you lose your own values if the system is not that good. So organizations are very important. The work environment is very important. It can influence many people, and we can see this. We can see this across the globe. Let's go to some of the challenges of teaching engineering ethics after all of this discussion. So number one, the concepts of morality and ethics are becoming blurred for many. So as I mentioned, we are not born with a kind of a clear-cut understanding of what is ethical and what is moral. So we learn this from places of worship, we learn this from society, and many times, this is very unfortunate also in many societies, that sometimes we are learning conflicting ethical codes. We are learning conflicting ethical codes. Maybe the religion is saying something, and then the society is saying something opposite. this is very dangerous, because at the end of the day, it will make the concept of being a moral person and the concept of the ethical code is very blurred for people. And unfortunately, this is very common currently. And then what adds to it is also the social media and the media in general that affected a lot of our views about morality and ethics and values. The codes of ethics can be internalized by many and may not be internalized by many. As I mentioned, many organizations, many societies, engineering societies, part of the package when you have a subscription, they will send to you this ethical code. But the question, do I read it carefully? Do I try to internalize or rationalize why this ethical code is done like this? So as far as that I cannot really rationalize it, as far as that I cannot try to internalize these codes, then I will not be able to apply it. I will not be able to apply it because I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. It's not clear for me. It's not clear for me. This is why part of the teaching the engineering ethics or any professional ethics need to be the rationalization of the ethical codes. It's not enough that I will give the student the ethical code for IEEE, for example, or ICEPEE or any big organization, and then tell them, okay, look into this, it seems very nice and something like this. But we need to reflect on it, and we need to try to understand from where this ethical code is coming, what kind of value system, that brought this ethical code in this organization. And why it looks like this, because once we understand, once we rationalize to the student why this ethical code looks like this, then it will be easily to be internalized, because at the end of the day, ethical behavior and ethical decision making is an internal issue. If we're not convinced with it, then all ethical codes or all teaching about ethics and other things will be just a waste of time. It will be just a waste of time, because if I am not convinced, if I don't know why I should behave like this and why I should not behave like this, then all these codes will be useless. It will be nice wording. People will like it and maybe put it in different rooms in the organization, or put it with the package they send to anybody joining the organization. But at the end of the day, it is an absurd. It's useless, because the main motive for any internal or for any ethical attitude should be a self-motivation. And if we are not internalizing the values, then there will be no action like this. The other one is a legal system, of course, but as we know that many issues related to professional ethics, some of them can have legal consequences and some of them may not have legal consequences. It's something like a recommended behavior. So if you don't do it, then maybe I guess your superior will point out to you, but you will not be punished legally. And this is another point. That not all the ethical codes having legal consequences, and we cannot make it having legal consequences. Otherwise, all companies or organization will get into trouble. So it should be something that we need to motivate people, and we need to rationalize to people why we are doing it. Another also important point that goes in teaching engineering ethics. The typical books on engineering ethics, they are not looking at the behavior outside the profession. They are not looking at the behavior outside the profession, and they will always stress that, okay, professional ethics or engineering ethics are mainly for the organization, mainly for the things. But as many scholars agree and talk about this issue, we cannot really differentiate between the professional behavior from the personal behavior. We cannot differentiate between the professional behavior from the personal behavior. And if there is a dichotomy between professional behavior and personal behavior. This is taking place all over the world with CEOs who are very successful, and then people will discover that they were also very corrupt at the same time. Big managers who have been on the news for their great attitudes, and also they write about how to be a successful manager and blah, blah, blah. But we discover that their personal life is a complete chaos. And they will come on the news because of the also their personal problems. So this dichotomy between professional behavior and personal behavior should not take place in teaching any engineering ethics course. And this, in my opinion, is missing from the current or majority of the classical engineering ethics books that people are using, because we are just focusing on the profession. We are just focusing on case studies related to engineering issue. But we need to connect this. We need to bridge this thing. The case studies also, there's another issue with the current courses, that the case studies are mainly from a certain perspective, which is not global by any means. So you'll find the case studies from UK or from United States or from Australia. And basically these countries having a very similar value system, but it is different from the value system in Japan. It is different from the value system in South Korea. It is different from the value system in the Muslim countries. So basically many of the details in these case studies might not be proper to the environment that people are in. So that's why we need to look into customizing the case studies for the students to be able to think about their local situation. And also we will give them other case studies to understand also other situations in other countries. But it's very important to try to have a global perspective in the case studies. So we need to pick up case studies from different environments. Let me just give a simple example that in the normal behavior, in many Western countries, paying a tip for somebody is not really a common practice. But in the Eastern culture, paying a tip or paying extra money for somebody is considered part of the normal behavior in the Eastern culture, in India, South Korea, Japan, the Muslim world, and other things. So it's part of life. So what is considered unethical in a certain part of the world is considered ethical in another part of the world. And this is very important for the professional ethics and the engineering practices. Especially when we talk about engineering, we are talking about a large set of activities. These activities will involve providers, will involve employee, will involve part-timers, will involve workers, will involve top CEOs and managers. So we need to understand the culture, and we need to see what is okay in this culture and what is not okay. And we cannot have a kind of a one set of standards. This is not designing a kind of a gear, or designing a car, or designing a ship. Yes, when we design a machine, we can have global standards. That's fine, it's okay. But for the behavior, no, we cannot have such clear-cut standardization. And this is one of the problems of teaching engineering ethics, that the idea of standardization, it will take influence on our mindset. So we think that all over the world, the same ethics applies, which is not true, And also, should we introduce a simplified discussion on philosophy of ethics, or a detailed one? This is still also a big debate among the people teaching professional ethics. So sometimes you can find a very small touch on the philosophical aspects of ethics, and sometimes in some books you'll find a bit of a more detailed one. And definitely for any profession, including engineering, specifically engineering, We cannot really get too much into the philosophical discussion, because the engineer mindset at the end of the day needs to look into what I should do, what I should not do, and why I should do this and why I should not do this. So this issue of how to introduce the discussion on what is behind ethics and why, from where ethics come, this also it's an important but need to be introduced in a certain way. Finally, the relationship between critical thinking and ethical decision making. In most of the texts, the current text is absent. And most of the current text is absent. The problem is we put the ethical decision making in a separate way, and then the critical thinking is taught in a separate courses, not necessarily in the engineering ethics or professional ethics courses. And this is very dangerous, because part of the decision making is to critically think about the situation you are in. If you cannot think critically about the situation you are in, you put certain priorities, certain issues, then definitely you will not be able to take a good decision. Definitely you will not be able to take a good decision. And as many people say, it's always ethical decision making is not black and white, was never black and white. Black and white maybe for big issues that are very clear. Yeah, for example, you should not steal. This is a black and white thing. But using the resources of the company for personal use, no, there's a lot of details here. If the company allow this to the employee or not allowing this, it is a common practice in the company that the people in the organization will use the resources for personal use or not. So there's a lot of details here. It's not black and white. In fact, we need to look into the organizational culture. We need to look into the legal system of the organization. We need to look into many things. So it's not really straightforward. But stealing from people, yes, it's clear-cut unethical behavior. So ethical decision-making within organization, in any profession, including engineering, is not as easy as it, and also is not black and white in most of the cases. It's not black and white in most of the cases. We can make different ethical decision-making in a similar case based on different circumstances. And this is a fact that we need to introduce to the student in teaching this, that there is no one answer. It's not mathematics. There's no one answer to all questions. Actually, it depends on and nobody will be able to do so unless they develop their critical thinking capacity. So the last one, just to be on time, the way forward. Okay. From the experience of teaching engineering ethics and professional ethics for a while, I think there's a lot of issues that need to be brought into the textbooks that we are teaching to the student. Number one is customization of ethical codes to reflect culture and background. This is very important. As I mentioned, sometimes a certain behavior is considered okay in a certain culture and is considered not okay in another culture. So we cannot make a kind of a blanket standardization on this. So the customization is very important. Number two, develop a critical thinking approach to ethical behavior rather than giving ready-made answers. As I mentioned, one of the problems of the engineering mindset that you are looking for standards, and standards is a ready-made answers. So, okay, what's the standard of building a house? 1, 2, 3, 4. What's the standard of building a certain machine? 1, 2, 3, 4. But in ethics, it doesn't work like this. In ethics, it doesn't work like this. So it needs an effort. So we need to teach the rationalization process. Also, for the case studies, which are used extensively in most of the professional ethics and engineering ethics books, need to be also customized for local culture and behavior. We need to give case studies and also discussions to understand other people. But this is something that we need to understand and we need to appreciate. there is a difference between understanding the other people's behavior and accepting the other people's behavior as a norm. They're two different issues. So when I understand what people are doing, even if it is in my culture not acceptable, but in their culture is acceptable due to certain background, whether it's a religious background or it is a traditional background, it will make the dealing with those people much more easier, because you respect the point of view, but not necessarily you can accept it as a norm for you. But you to develop this type of sensitivity. We need to develop this type of sensitivity in looking into, especially as I mentioned, we have a big challenge now that the job market is a global market. We need to bridge the gap between professional and personal behavior, which is missing from most of the current textbooks. People will just touch on ethics and morals in general, but they will not try to link everything together. And it is linked. In fact, the early books in Islamic civilization was always linking this together. The way the people used to have the professional ethics book, they will talk about the cardinal values, the main values, and then based on these main values, they will extract what each profession should do, which is a very nice approach that the current engineering ethics books are not really following. So it might need a lot of work to produce something like this, which will be quite valuable to students and to practitioners as well. Because as I mentioned, we cannot be a moral people unless we understand and rationalize and internalize the ethical codes and the values that we are following. And finally, we need to also bring to the teaching of such courses the reflection part. So we need to give the students or the practitioners a space to reflect on why they are doing what they are doing. It's very important. Even in good organizations, even in very good organizations which have a kind of a good culture, a moral culture, usually they will help the employee if they commit anything wrong. Before they are punishing anybody, they will try to help the person to reflect why he or she has done what they have done. Because if I don't understand why I have done what I have done, I will repeat it again. I need to understand why I have done something wrong, whether it is wrong legally or wrong ethically. So this issue of reflection need to be brought into the teaching to help the student to reflect on themselves, from where you got your values, why you believe that you should not do this and you can do this, why you believe like this. So this type of reflection is very important, and it will help to internalize the ethical codes in a much powerful way. And at the end of the day, we can have really what we are looking for is a moral person, a whole person, not only just behaving morally in the profession and immorally outside the profession. So we can have a moral person, both a whole person, and at the same time also having a moral person, we'll have a moral organization. If you have majority of the people in the organization are moral, then the whole organization will be moral, because organizations are people at the end of the day. So by this, I thank you very much. I hope I didn't exceed my time, and I hope these reflections are useful to people, and I'll be happy to hear any comments or questions or anything. Thank you much.
Prof. Waleed, it's a very good sharing, of course, definitely. And one of the main points that I'm taking, the heart of ethics is truthfulness. I have myself have a lot of questions, but since it's easy for me to access to ask you, let us open the floor, the people who are here to ask the questions to you. So any questions from our participants? You can raise your hand if you would like to ask the questions to Prof.
Not only question, if you also disagree or you have a comment or anything, please, we'll be happy to.
Feedback, the comments, we welcome you. while waiting for others to ask you questions of giving the feedbacks, I would like to ask one questions to you, Prof, because we are dealing with Generation Z, which is sometimes they are too obsessed with the Internet of Things, and they are less in the social context. And how can we, what we call it, promote them with all the ethical values?
And of course, this question is raised now by many. And when we look at also some statistics of the new generation staying in one organization, is actually, we will find that many people are moving from one organization to another. And part of this moving or flipping from one organization to another, because they cannot stand the system. They cannot stand the system. They are more or less anti-system. So they prefer to do their own freelance work. They prefer to do this type of things. And this is one of the drawbacks of the social media and many other things that people are taking place. But the only solution is still, in my opinion, of course, the only solution is still is to try to rationalize again on the value system. So people need to go back to the value system. What value system you have? Yeah, for example, many people in many organizations, the behavior to the superiors is becoming very impolite, I would say, or sometimes very rebellious for no reason, just to show that they are rebellious, or they are just not in the system. But this is not really a good ethical behavior in general, and not also a good organizational behavior in general. So we need to go back to the basics again. We need to go back to the basics, and we need to try to rationalize why we should do what we are doing. This is the only way. Otherwise, as I mentioned, and there's even some books written about what people call moral fluidity on this age. So morals are becoming very fluidic. People are becoming confused what is right and what is wrong.
I have one question from Dr. Nasruddin. Yes, Dr. Nasruddin.
Thank you very well, Prof. I'm sorry if I put my camera, I look half because I use my computer,
That's okay.
my desktop. Yeah. Prof. Waleed, thank you very well for this very valuable speech. But my things regarding this ethics and values and norms, you know, for engineer, I know everyone knows that it's very highly valuable, and without it, that means we don't have an engineer. The whole life will be destroyed, because we are Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once said in Surah Al-Anbiya, وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِن بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. Normally, I told my student that عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ, that means here we talk about engineer, whom is supposed to put the things on the right places. If they never put the things in the right places, everything will be destroyed. So, but nowadays, my worry, especially in this, after this corona, as yesterday, I say yesterday to our Faris keynote speaker, now we have two generations, before and after. We know now, for example, we gave the students the exam. Initially, if everyone remember the first semester, when we have this MCO, we say that we have to be very strict. Don't give a student a chance to cheat. Nowadays, no. Everyone say open book exam, but don't use, at least don't use internet. After this one, still the students start to cheat, and I understand that the student under very high stress, the lecturer under very high stress. My worry now really, Prof, for it is that, for example, now in my house, I have my daughter now in the Faculty of Medicine for almost 2 years. She never see everything, she never touch anyone. Even if they would like to make a test on someone, they bring her small brother and start to touch him, put this one here, put this one here. So my worry now, Prof, for the coming new generation, after if this one COVID-19 continue for another 1 year or 2 years, how the values and ethics for our engineer, for our graduate will be. Because sometimes, you know, now initial at your children from education in the future. And this is one of the challenges that we are going to face sooner or later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Faris. I think there is one point that maybe during COVID-19 is good. Of course, it's bad for some aspect, as you mentioned, but it is good for another aspect. At home during this COVID-19 issue told me we discover a lot of improper behavior of our kids. And they said this for the first time. And their kids sometimes are quite old, so they are not young anymore. There is one role that has been missing for rationalizing the good behavior, which is the role of the family, unfortunately. This role of the family with the globalization for the past 30 or 40 years, working mother and working father, and also having maids and assistants to help on many things. So there is no time at home. There's no time at home to look into the value system. What does family hold? What does family hold? Because there's one question, one important question that we need always to ask ourselves and ask our kids. What our family hold? What kind of value our family hold? And as we used to say, there's a lot of proverbs, I think in Malay, in Arabic also. All of these proverbs will say that teaching while you are still young at home will be engraved in your head, So basically, during this COVID-19, yes, many cheating cases might happen all over the world, not only in here, but all over the world. And people will take advantage and people will do this and that. But all of this, the question is, what kind of houses, what kind of families they are coming from? What kind of value the family try to instill into these people? The university or the school cannot do everything. And the idea that the university or the school can do everything and we create multi-level of protection to avoid this cheating or avoid this, it is impossible. Human beings are very clever, especially when it comes to misbehavior. They are very, very clever. So no law, no legal system, no administrative system will be able to stop people from doing wrong. But the only thing that will stop people from doing wrong is when we go back to the basics, and the role of the family need to come back, the role of the rationalizing what this family holds, what this family stand for. This is very important. So it's a big issue. Yes, we can point out to it, but we cannot really correct it, because you can point out to people when you teach professional ethics that the value system comes from the family, and the family need to stand for some values and all of this. But of course, you cannot go to each family and talk to them, what are you doing with your kids? But we need to encourage this attitude. We need to try to give the attention of the people. But it is a big problem, yes. It is a very big problem, yes. But as I mentioned, COVID-19, though it has some drawbacks, but it has some good issues that we start to watch ourselves and watch the kids very closely, not like before, which might be a turning point, in fact, in turning from bad behavior to good behavior in many aspects. This is my just reflection on the question. Yeah. I will not say this is an answer, but just a reflection on the question. Yeah.
Jazakallah, Prof. Waleed. Any one last questions, because you are almost done now. Any other questions?
From then, Prof. Zuraida.
Okay.
Yes, Prof. Waleed.
Okay.
Okay. Can I have one question?
One questions from Dali?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Waleed, for the insightful presentation. Very interesting. In one of the slides, you mentioned about the sources of values, Prof. Which is at the bottom of the list. You've got the organization, and then how do you evaluate us, I mean IIUM, as an institution that values and ethics so much? Maybe just what differentiate us from many other institutions in other places, including in Malaysia or globally as well. So yeah, how do you evaluate us? I mean, how much is the influence that we can already share, yeah, with to our staff, both our staff and also our students, yeah, with regard to these values? And then have we ever evaluated as well how effective it is in us in the what we call in calculating these values that we believe within our staff and students as well? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is a very interesting question. Of course, there is a lot of universities and colleges all over the world which people classify them as religiously affiliated. So we have many Christian universities in the United States, in UK, in Australia. We have also Jewish universities in some places, United States and other places. We have in South Korea, Buddhist universities, and also in Japan. So basically religiously affiliated universities are all over the world, all over the world. And one of the big challenges to religiously affiliated universities, and Islamic universities are part of them, is they stand for a certain value system. They stand for a certain value system. So the pressure on them to be a moral community is much more than any other university. One of the ways basically to test, very simple way to test, and what Prof. Nasruddin mentioned a few minutes ago, let's say I'm teaching now professional ethics and I give the student exam and I discover that 60% of the students cheated in the exam, let's say. This is an indication that actually I was not successful. I was not successful in teaching them ethics. It's a complete failure. It's a complete failure. I have the staff, the academic staff, and also administrative staff. They should stand for the value of hard work and being very professional and other things which are also Islamic values and religious values in general, not only Islamic, it's a religious value in general. To do your work to the perfection, other things. And then I found that I'm not really doing it carefully. I'm negligent. I don't pay attention to what I'm doing. Then means that the people did not internalize the value system in this organization. So again, the organization failed. Again, the organization failed. So the only clear indicator for whether a certain organization, especially religiously affiliated universities, failed or not is the behavior of the people in it. Students, academics, admin staff, and management. If we find a high percentage of violation of the values, then this organization has failed. This is very simple, very straightforward. And then we need to look why it has failed. And the solution was never by complicating legal system. The solution was never by putting a lot of restriction. Like we mentioned, the issue of cheating. This you put more restriction, it will not solve the problem. The only solution for the problem is to rationalize why you are doing what you are doing. And you need to have the internal motivation that you really uphold these values and you're convinced to uphold these values. Otherwise, why you are coming to a kind of a religiously affiliated universities? I remember I have some of my colleagues in the United States in some Christian universities. It's part of the joining the university for students and for staff is to sign a pledge that they are upholding the values of the biblical values of Christianity. So it's part of their pledge. And this is normal. This is no issue. Why? Because otherwise, if people violate this, then the university has the right to maybe dismiss the students or dismiss the faculty or whatever. But why you are joining if you are not really upholding these values? You can join any other place. So I think the main indicator is whether we obey the values or we violate the values. If the violation is very high, then the organization failed to convey the values or to entrench the values in the people's mind. Wallahu a'lam.
Prof, Jazakallah, Prof, because
Thank you very much, Dr. Zuraida. Just I have something here with Dr. Waleed for this point, and I guess it is good point also for Kulliyyah of Engineering. One day I attend one speech for Prof. Kamal Hassan when he talk about the same point Dr. Waleed raised right now about ethics for the religions, university, etc. He mentioned that the highest number of cheating in IIUM is in faculty of IRKH, and the lowest overall is in Kulliyyah Engineering. I never forget that one. Even he said, why this one happened? He said that means there is something wrong. And one of the points that I'm still remembering, people say, now look at where we send our good students. We send our good student, Dr. Zuraida, Dr. Waleed, Prof. Aisha, Dr. Ali, everyone here. We ask them to join either Faculty of Medicine or Faculty of Engineering. Whenever we ask them to join IRKH, that means who will go there? This is the first point that we have to look at. That means we send the lowest academic level to those faculties. That means there is something from the input from the beginning, the input is wrong. That's why if you look worldwide at all of those religious universities, you'll find the same approach. That's why you'll find, for example, in engineering, when the students come, we teach them, and by the model, when they see the behavior of Prof. Aisha, for example, behavior of Dr. Zuraida, Dr. Waleed, immediately students tell you that I wish to be like you and start to follow your steps. Therefore, by default, he will go to the right path. But over there, he is not confident that this is the right place, or he has been forced to come over there. So therefore, a lot of issues raise up. And really, this one, it needs, those ethics, it needs to stand up to find out where is the gap. Thank you very much, Prof.
thank you, Professor Dean. And it could be that because of the students see you also that motivating them, you become Murabi, inshallah. So I'm keep on glancing at the time. It's 10:08. It could be a lot of questions need to be asked. I'm encouraging our participants to directly contact Prof. Waleed through his email. And I would like to thank all the participants that attending this keynote speech, which is very, very good. And I would like to end this keynote speech by saying that a teaching ethic, nurturing students to become an ethical person is not just a job or a role or responsibility of the educators of the engineering ethics educators only, but it is our job. So just make sure, what we call it, to highlight that our students are the next generation's ummah. They are bring what we call it, the new hopes for us to become a good ummah. So this is our job, to make them ethical persons. I will end with that things.